Olivia Martinez, at 26 years old, seemed to have everything anyone could wish for. She was the only daughter of Mr. Daniel and Mrs. Sophia Martinez, one of the most affluent families in the nation. Her father managed a vast conglomerate of businesses, while her mother was a celebrated philanthropist. Olivia had been raised in opulence, surrounded by luxury cars, grand estates, and all the finest possessions money could afford. However, despite her abundant wealth, Olivia felt an emptiness inside. The people around her were more captivated by her family's fortune than by her as an individual. She had friends, but over time, she realized they were more interested in her lifestyle than in who she truly was. The men she dated were similarly fixated on her wealth and status, never on her heart. Olivia yearned to be loved for her true self, not for her family's riches. One evening, after a particularly superficial conversation with a man her father had introduced her to, Olivia knew something had to change. This man, like many others, was more intent on flaunting his wealth to impress her than on genuinely getting to know her. She desired more, a life where she could be herself and find love based on who she truly was, not on her family's name. Olivia decided she needed to leave her life of privilege behind, even if just temporarily. She wanted to experience the world outside her bubble, live simply, and see if she could find love where no one knew her background. Before making any drastic decisions, Olivia sat down with her parents to discuss her plan. They were in the spacious dining room of their mansion. "I've been contemplating something for a while," Olivia began, her heart racing. "I want to leave the city for a while. I need time to find myself, away from everything here." Her mother, Mrs. Sophia, immediately frowned. "Leave, Olivia. You're a young woman. The world outside is harsh, especially for someone like you. You don't need to go anywhere. We can find you a good match here, someone who will love and care for you." Olivia sighed, knowing her mother wouldn't understand. "But that's the issue, Mom. All the men I meet are only interested in what I have, not in me. I want to live a simple life for a while, away from all this. I want to find someone who loves me for who I am." Mrs. Sophia shook her head. "It's not safe out there for a girl like you. What if something happens? How will you survive without the comfort and protection of this home? You don't need to struggle when everything you need is right here." Olivia looked to her father, hoping for support. Mr. Daniel, a stern but thoughtful man, had been listening quietly. "I won't be gone forever," Olivia said, turning to him. "I just need some time to figure things out. If I don't find what I'm looking for, if I can't find love on my own, I'll come back. I'll agree to marry the man you want me to marry." Her father raised an eyebrow. "You mean the tech mogul Ethan who you have consistently refused to meet?" "Yes," Olivia nodded. "I'll meet him eventually, but first, I need to do this. I need to know if I can live a life where people see me for me, not for our name." Mr. Daniel leaned back in his chair, contemplating his daughter's words. He loved Olivia dearly and, as much as he wanted her to marry someone powerful like Ethan, he understood her need for independence. He had seen her frustration over the years in trying to find someone who valued her beyond her wealth. Mrs. Sophia, however, was not convinced. "Daniel, tell her this is a bad idea. She's a girl, she can't just wander off on her own. The world isn't kind to women, especially those who've never known hardship. It's dangerous." Mr. Daniel gave Olivia a small nod of approval. "If this is what you need to do, Olivia, then I'll support you. I don't want you to regret not trying to find your own path." He turned to his wife. "Sophia, she's strong. We have to trust her." Mrs. Sophia still looked uneasy. "Fine, but promise me you'll be careful, Olivia." "I will, Mom," Olivia replied with a smile. "I won't be gone long. I just need time away from all the trouble here." With her plan set, Olivia packed a small suitcase with only simple clothes, leaving behind her expensive dresses, jewelry, and the life of luxury she had always known. The next day, with her father's reluctant blessing and her mother's worried gaze, Olivia left the city. She boarded a bus to a distant place, hoping to start anew. The city she chose was Rivertown, a small but lively town known for its vibrant markets and hard-working residents. It was a place where no one would recognize her as the affluent heiress from the capital, allowing her to blend in and live a simple life just like anyone else. Upon arriving in Rivertown, Olivia found a modest one-room apartment to rent. It was nothing like the mansion she had grown up in, but it was sufficient for her needs. The apartment contained only a bed, a table, and a window overlooking the bustling streets below. There were no luxuries, no servants to cater to her every need, but for the first time in her life, Olivia felt free. Once settled, Olivia knew she needed to find a job. She couldn't live off her family's wealth if she truly wanted to experience life as an ordinary person. After wandering the streets of Rivertown for a few days, she stumbled upon a small restaurant called Mama Rosa's Kitchen. The diner had a cozy, inviting atmosphere, with the aroma of home-cooked meals filling the air. It was always busy with people coming and going, and something about the simplicity of the place drew Olivia in. With her heart racing, Olivia walked inside and approached Mama Rosa, the owner, to inquire about job openings. Mama Rosa was a kind woman in her mid-50s with a round face and a warm smile. She assessed Olivia, noting her neat but modest attire, and asked a few questions. Satisfied with Olivia's answers, Mama Rosa decided to give her a chance. "We could use another waitress around here," Mama Rosa said. "But it's tough work. You'll be on your feet all day, serving tables, cleaning up, and dealing with all kinds of customers. Do you think you can handle it?" Olivia smiled, determined to prove herself. "Yes, I can handle it. I'll do my best." And so, Olivia began her new life as a waitress at Mama Rosa's Kitchen. The work was much harder than she had ever imagined. She spent long hours on her feet, carrying trays of food, cleaning tables, and taking orders. Her back ached, and her hands became rough from the constant cleaning. But despite the exhaustion, Olivia found a sense of purpose in this simple life. For the first time, she was living a life that wasn't handed to her on a silver platter. The customers at Mama Rosa's Kitchen were regular folks, workers, families, and students seeking affordable meals. They treated Olivia just like any other waitress, and that was exactly what she wanted. She was no longer the wealthy heiress from a powerful family, she was simply Olivia, the new waitress at the diner. One evening, as Olivia wiped down a table, she looked out at the busy streets of Rivertown and smiled to herself. She had left behind the world of wealth and privilege, but in doing so, she had found something more valuable, freedom. She wondered what the future held. Would she find the love she had been searching for, or would she eventually return to her old life, marrying the man her father wanted? For now, she was content to wait and see. This was her time to discover who she truly was, and her journey had only just begun. As Olivia continued working at Mama Rosa's Kitchen, her life in Rivertown began to settle into a routine. The work was still exhausting, but the sense of independence she felt made it worthwhile. However, everything changed one evening when Ethan, the kind construction worker she had gotten to know over the past few weeks, asked her out on a date. It had been a long day at the diner, and Olivia was busy cleaning up when Ethan, with his usual warm smile, approached her. "Hey Olivia," he said casually, leaning against the counter. "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me sometime. I know a quiet spot by the river." Olivia's heart raced. She had grown fond of Ethan's company over the past few weeks. He seemed genuine, down-to-earth, and different from the men she had known in her old life. There was no pretense, no flashy displays of wealth, just simple, honest conversations. More importantly, she believed he didn't know anything about her background. To Ethan, she was just Olivia the waitress. Smiling, she agreed, "I'd love that." Their first few dates were wonderful. Ethan took her to quiet, simple places where they could talk, laugh, and enjoy each other's company. He listened to her stories about working at the diner, shared his experiences as a builder, and made her feel special. Olivia found herself opening up to him, thinking that maybe she had finally found the love she was looking for in this small town, with a man who didn't know she was an heiress. It seemed possible. But as the weeks went by, Olivia began to notice troubling signs in her relationship with Ethan. It started with him borrowing small amounts of money. "Hey Olivia, could you lend me a little cash? I've got an urgent bill to pay, and my paycheck got delayed," he said casually one evening. At first, Olivia didn't think much of it. She had saved some money from her work at the diner, and it wasn't a big deal to help him out. But then it happened again and again. Each time, Ethan had a reason, a broken tool, an unexpected expense, or a favor he needed to return. The amounts were small at first, but they quickly added up. Olivia found herself dipping into her savings more and more, but she didn't want to think the worst. After all, Ethan didn't know she was wealthy, he couldn't possibly be using her for money. However, as time passed, Olivia started noticing other things. Ethan often spoke about how she could aim higher in life, hinting that she should be doing more than just working at the diner. "You're smart, Olivia," he said one afternoon as they sat by the river. "Why settle for waiting? You could be doing bigger things." The way he said it made her feel uneasy, as though he knew something about her that he wasn't saying. He seemed to push her towards something greater, as if he expected more from her than she was willing to reveal. Olivia brushed it off at first, thinking he just wanted to motivate her, but the nagging feeling in her chest grew stronger with each passing day. Then came the afternoon that shattered her world. It was a quiet day at the diner, and Olivia had just finished her shift. She was walking out the back when she saw Ethan leaning against the wall, talking on his phone. He didn't notice her approach, so she stopped, curious to hear what he was saying. "Yeah, man, it's going well," Ethan said, his voice low but confident. "I'm close to getting more out of her. I'm telling you, calm down. You know these rich girls can be spoiled. I followed her here to Rivertown. Imagine the heiress from the Martinez Empire pretending to be poor. All this about herself," he added with a loud laugh. Olivia froze in place. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Ethan knew who she was all along. He had followed her to Rivertown. "Yeah, her dad's the billionaire. I found out where she went after she left the city. She's trying to live a quiet life or something, but I'm working on it. She's already giving me money, it won't be long before I get more out of her," Ethan continued. Tears filled Olivia's eyes. Every moment they had shared, every conversation, every smile, it was all a lie. Ethan hadn't cared about her as Olivia the waitress, he had only seen her as Olivia Martinez, the rich heiress. He had known all along and had used her just like the others. With her heart shattered, Olivia stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. "So this was your plan all along?" Ethan turned sharply, his eyes wide with shock. "Olivia." She cut him off, holding up a hand to stop him. "I heard everything you said. You knew who I was and followed me here just to use me." Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The guilt on his face was enough for Olivia to know the truth. Without waiting for an explanation, she turned and walked away, her tears flowing freely. She had trusted him and believed she had found something real, but it had all been a facade. Ethan had been playing her from the very beginning. That night, Olivia made a decision. She couldn't stay in Rivertown any longer. The town had been tainted by the betrayal she had suffered. She needed to go somewhere even more remote, where no one would find her and where she could truly start over. She packed her things, her heart heavy with disappointment, and called her parents. Her mother answered first, her voice filled with concern. "Olivia, darling, are you all right? You haven't called in a while." "I'm fine, Mom," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I need more time. I'm leaving Rivertown. I just need space." Her mother, sensing something was wrong, began to protest. Olivia, you're a young woman. We can send someone to you. I'll be fine. Olivia interrupted. I'll keep in touch, but not as often. Please don't worry about me. I just need to figure things out on my own. Her father, who had been listening quietly in the background, spoke up. We trust you, Olivia, but remember, you can always come home. You don't have to do this alone. Olivia sighed, her heart aching with both sadness and gratitude. I know, Dad. I'll be okay. With that, Olivia ended the call. She was determined to move forward, to find herself once again in a place where no one knew her past. She didn't know where her journey would take her, but one thing was certain, she would never let anyone take advantage of her again. Olivia had left the bustling life of Rivertown behind after Ethan's betrayal. She knew she needed a complete change of scenery, something far from the town life she had grown accustomed to. She wanted to find peace away from the people who might recognize her or exploit her wealth. With her heart still heavy from disappointment, Olivia decided to move to a rural village far from the hustle and bustle of the city. The village she chose was small and quiet, with dusty roads, simple houses, and a slower pace of life. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the biggest excitement was market day, and where strangers were noticed. Olivia was sure that no one here would know about her past, her family, or the riches she had left behind. She had become skilled at keeping her identity hidden, and in this village, she could start over once again. After settling into a modest room she rented from an elderly widow, Olivia decided she needed to find a job. Her savings were running low, and she wanted to earn her way like any ordinary person. As she walked through the village one sunny afternoon, she passed a small supermarket and noticed a handwritten sign in the window, "Salesgirl needed." It seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without hesitation, Olivia walked inside and asked the shopkeeper if the job was still available. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile named Mr. Leo, asked a few simple questions about her experience and background. Olivia, sticking to her story, told him she had finished secondary school and had worked odd jobs in other towns before arriving here. Mr. Leo seemed satisfied with her answers and hired her on the spot. You can start tomorrow, he said, handing her an apron. It's nothing too hard, just stocking shelves, helping customers, and keeping the place tidy. Olivia thanked him and left the supermarket feeling relieved. This was exactly what she needed, a simple job in a quiet village, far away from the painful memories of Ethan and Rivertown. The next morning, Olivia arrived at the supermarket, ready to begin her new role. That's where she met Mia. Mia was the other salesgirl at the supermarket, in her early 20s with bright eyes and a friendly smile. She quickly welcomed Olivia, and they soon became friends. Mia was easy to talk to, and as they worked side by side, they shared stories about their lives. Olivia told Mia that she was an orphan who had only completed secondary school, carefully sticking to her fabricated story. She didn't want anyone here to know who she really was. Mia, in turn, shared her dreams and hopes with Olivia. I live with my uncle and aunt, Mia said one day as they restocked the shelves. They're nice, but the village is too small for me. I want more from life. What do you mean? Olivia asked, curious. I want to marry a rich man, Mia replied with a determined look in her eyes. I want to leave this village, move to the big city, and live a better life. I've always dreamed of wearing fancy clothes and living in a nice house. This place is too small for me. Olivia nodded, understanding her friend's ambition. Mia was sweet, but it was clear she had her sights set on finding a way out of the village. She often talked about meeting a man who would change her life, someone who could offer her the luxury and comfort she longed for. Olivia, on the other hand, was running away from that very life, but she understood why Mia dreamed of escaping poverty. The days at the supermarket passed quietly. Olivia felt a sense of peace working alongside Mia, listening to the village gossip, and learning about the regular customers. It was a simple life, but for Olivia, it was healing. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be pursued for her wealth, to be seen as nothing more than the heiress to a fortune. But that peace didn't last long. One afternoon, as Olivia was working behind the counter, a man walked into the supermarket. His name was Marcus, and he was well known in the village for being one of the wealthiest men around. Marcus owned the largest house in the village, a grand structure that stood out among the simpler homes. He wasn't fabulously rich by city standards, but in the village, Marcus was considered wealthy. He was tall and confident, with an air of authority that immediately caught Olivia's attention. He smiled at her as he approached the counter to pay for his items. "Hello," he said, his voice smooth and pleasant. "I haven't seen you around here before. Are you new to the village?" Olivia smiled politely. "Yes, I am. I've only been here for a few weeks." "Well, welcome," Marcus replied, handing her the money. "It's nice to have a fresh face in the village." As he walked out, Olivia thought little of the encounter. Mia seemed polite, but she had learned to be careful with her heart after what had happened with Ethan. She had no interest in getting involved in another relationship, especially not so soon after her last disappointment. However, it soon became clear that Marcus was interested in her. Over the next few days, he began stopping by the supermarket more often, always finding a reason to talk to Olivia. He complimented her on her work, asked about her day, and made casual conversation. At first, Olivia brushed it off as friendliness, but as his visits became more frequent, she realized he was pursuing her. Marcus wasn't the only one who noticed the growing connection. Mia, who had always dreamed of marrying a rich man, began to grow jealous. She had set her sights on Marcus long before Olivia had arrived in the village. In her eyes, Marcus was her ticket out of the village, the man who could give her the life she had always dreamed of. But now, it seemed that Marcus had turned his attention to Olivia instead. One afternoon, after Marcus had left the supermarket, Mia turned to Olivia with a forced smile. "He likes you, you know." Olivia looked at her, confused. "Who, Marcus?" Mia replied, her voice tight. "He's been coming here just to see you." Olivia felt a pang of discomfort. "I'm not looking for anything right now," she said softly, trying to reassure Mia. "I'm just focusing on my job." Mia's expression softened a little, but there was still a flicker of envy in her eyes. "I hope so. I've always had my eye on Marcus. He's the only man in this village who can give me the life I want." Olivia didn't say anything more. She could see how much Mia wanted to leave the village, how much she longed for a life of wealth and comfort. But for Olivia, wealth had only brought heartache. The last thing she wanted was to be caught in another situation where someone's interest in her might be more about what she could offer than who she was. As the days passed, Marcus continued to show interest in Olivia, but she kept her distance, unsure of whether she could trust him. Though she remained friendly with Mia, the tension between them grew. Olivia could see that Mia's jealousy was simmering just beneath the surface. Once again, Olivia found herself in a situation where her past and present seemed to collide. She had come to the village to find peace, but it seemed that even here, love and trust were hard to find. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. It was a bright, bustling day, and the local market was alive with activity. Children were playing, running around, and laughing as the villagers went about their day. Olivia had just finished her shift at the supermarket and was walking down the road, her thoughts wandering. She noticed a group of boys playing football nearby, their game spilling onto the street. Before she could react, the ball soared through the air, heading straight for her. Just as she braced herself, a man rushed toward her, intending to push her out of the ball's path. In his rush, he ended up swaying her right into his arms. For a moment, everything stopped. Olivia found herself pressed against his chest, and when she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. The man who had caught her was tall, dark-skinned, and incredibly well-built. His handsome face was framed with deep concern, but there was kindness in his eyes that made her heart race. They stood frozen, their eyes locked as though the world around them had disappeared. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice deep and gentle, his arms still around her. Olivia, her heart pounding, nodded slowly. "I think so," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled, his face softening as he released her. "I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to catch you like that, but I didn't want you to get hit." Olivia, still slightly dazed from the encounter, smiled back. "Thank you. I didn't see the ball coming." After a brief pause, the man extended his hand. "I'm Adam, by the way." Olivia replied, shaking his hand, her pulse still racing as she walked home. Later that day, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about Adam. There was something about the way he had swooped in to help her, something about the kindness in his eyes that made her feel at ease. She didn't know much about him, but something told her she would be seeing him again, and she was right. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and Adam began crossing paths more often. Whether by coincidence or fate, they quickly fell into a comfortable routine of talking whenever they ran into each other. Adam told her that he was a construction worker and, like many men in the village, he worked hard to make ends meet. He wasn't wealthy, but that didn't matter to Olivia. He had a warm heart, and in his presence, Olivia felt safe and happy. Before she knew it, Olivia found herself looking forward to every moment she spent with Adam. They took long walks around the village, talked by the river, and shared stories about their lives. With Adam, Olivia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of happiness, a sense of peace. Ethan's betrayal no longer haunted her, her thoughts barely remembered him at all. Adam was different, and Olivia cherished every second they spent together. But while Olivia's feelings for Adam deepened, Marcus, the wealthiest man in the village, was growing increasingly jealous. Marcus had been pursuing Olivia for weeks, believing that he should be the one she chose with his 4-bedroom bungalow, his wealth, and his status in the village. He had always assumed that Olivia would come around to seeing him as the best option, but now, with Adam in the picture, Marcus's confidence was shaken. Determined to win Olivia over, Marcus decided to enlist the help of Mia, Olivia's friend and colleague at the supermarket. Mia, who had once harbored feelings for Marcus herself, had hoped that he might eventually choose her. But seeing his growing obsession with Olivia left her bitter and envious. One afternoon, Marcus pulled Mia aside in a quiet corner of the supermarket. "Mia," he began, lowering his voice, "I need your help with something." Mia looked at him curiously. "What do you need help with?" "It's Olivia," Marcus said, frustration creeping into his tone. "She's spending too much time with that construction worker, Adam. You know I'm the better match for her. She needs to realize that. I need you to convince her." Mia felt a pang of jealousy at Marcus's words. She had always hoped he would choose her, but now he was asking her to help him win over Olivia despite her envy. She nodded, forcing a smile. "I'll talk to her." That evening, after work, Mia approached Olivia as they were cleaning up the supermarket. "Olivia," Mia began, trying to sound casual, "I've noticed something, and I think it's time we talk about it." Olivia looked up, sensing a serious conversation coming. "What's on your mind?" Mia hesitated for a moment before continuing. "It's Marcus. You know he's been interested in you for a while now. He's got everything, a big house, money, and status. Don't you think you should consider him? He's the best option for you." Olivia sighed, feeling a familiar discomfort rise in her chest. "Mia, I don't feel anything for Marcus. I'm not interested in him." Mia frowned, clearly frustrated. "But why not? Most of the girls in this village would kill to have a man like Marcus interested in them. He's rich." "Emily," Mia said, but Olivia interrupted. "I don't care about money." Olivia paused, sensing a deeper question in Mia's words. She had always been careful not to reveal too much about her past, but now it seemed Mia had picked up on something. "I don't care about money," Olivia said firmly. I've learned that wealth doesn't bring happiness. What I care about is how I feel when I'm with someone. And when I'm with Adam, I feel something real. Mia let out a short, mocking laugh. So you'd rather be with Adam, a broke construction worker? You could have Marcus, who owns the biggest house in the village, and instead, you're falling for someone who barely has anything. Olivia's expression hardened. Yes, I would rather be with Adam. He makes me happy. Mia's jealousy flared, and though she tried to hide it, Olivia could see the anger in her eyes. Without another word, Mia turned and left, leaving Olivia standing alone in the quiet supermarket. The tension between them had finally boiled over, but Olivia didn't regret her words. She knew how she felt about Adam, and no amount of money or status could change that. As she walked home that evening, Olivia's thoughts returned to Adam. She didn't know where their friendship would lead, but for now, she was content to let it grow naturally. For the first time in a long time, she felt something genuine, something that had nothing to do with wealth, status, or family expectations. And that was enough. Adam sat back in the small, cozy hotel room, the best one in the village. It wasn't much by city standards, but it was clean and comfortable, and that was enough for him. The room was dimly lit with simple wooden furniture and a large window overlooking the village. He could hear the faint sounds of people outside, but his mind was far away, lost in thoughts of Olivia. He smiled to himself as he leaned back against the headboard, thinking about her, the way their paths had crossed unexpectedly, the way she had fallen into his arms that day when he tried to shield her from the football. He hadn't expected to meet someone like her when he first arrived in the village. In fact, he hadn't expected much at all when he took on the project. This was supposed to be a short-term escape from the pressures of city life, a way to get away from his parents' endless discussions about his future. But Olivia had changed everything. What Olivia didn't know was that Adam wasn't just any ordinary construction worker. He was actually David Martinez, a self-made tech billionaire from one of the wealthiest families in the country. His parents, well-known socialites in the city, had raised him in a world of privilege and high expectations. Like Olivia, he had grown up surrounded by wealth, but he had made a name for himself with his own business ventures. David had moved to the United States in his early 20s, where he built his tech company from the ground up. It wasn't long before his innovations in telecommunications technology caught the attention of major corporations, and his success skyrocketed. But along with that success came pressure. His parents, especially his mother, were always trying to push him toward an arranged marriage with someone they deemed suitable. Most recently, they had been pressuring him to meet the daughter of Mr. Thompson, the richest man in the city. David had resisted the idea of marrying someone just because their families aligned financially. The thought of an arranged marriage felt suffocating to him, especially since he didn't believe in marrying for convenience or status. He wanted something real. When the contract to install telecommunication devices underground in the village had come up, David had jumped at the chance to escape the city, if only for a little while. His team could have handled the project without him, but he saw it as an opportunity to get away from the noise and the constant demands of his parents and the expectations that came with his wealth. For a few weeks, he could be just Adam, a construction worker, and no one would know his real identity. What he hadn't expected was to meet Olivia. The first time he saw her, he had been struck by her innocence. She didn't carry the usual airs of high-class women he was used to back in the city. There was no pretense, no vanity, just genuine warmth and simplicity. She had run right into him that day in the village, and from the moment he had held her in his arms, he knew she was different. He had sensed that she didn't see him as anyone special, just another ordinary worker trying to get by in the village, and that was what intrigued him the most. David had quickly decided that he liked being just Adam around her. He had told his workers to play along with the idea that he was just a regular construction worker. He didn't want Olivia to know about his wealth or his background, he wanted to see if her feelings for him were real, not influenced by his status. In the past, women had been drawn to him for all the wrong reasons: his money, his power, his fame, but Olivia seemed to like him for who he was, or at least for who she thought he was. David laughed quietly to himself as he thought about it. It was ironic, really. He had come to the village to get away from his family's demands and their obsession with wealth, and yet here he was, pretending to be someone he wasn't. But for the first time in a long time, he felt free. He didn't have to worry about impressing anyone or living up to his family's name. He could just be Adam, the man who was slowly falling for a sweet, innocent girl who didn't even know his real name. He leaned forward, resting his elbow on his knees and running his hands through his hair. Olivia, he whispered her name softly to himself, smiling at the thought of her. There was something so refreshing about the way she saw the world. She wasn't jaded or cynical like the women he had met in the city. She wasn't after his money or trying to manipulate him for her own gain. In fact, she seemed completely unaware of his wealth, and that only made him more drawn to her. David's thoughts drifted back to their conversations. Every time they talked, she opened up a little more, revealing bits and pieces of her life. Though he had sensed there were things she wasn't telling him, he wasn't the only one with secrets, and he respected that. Whatever she was hiding, he figured it was probably just as complicated as his own story. Still, he admired her spirit, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence, even though she was clearly used to simpler things. As David sat in his hotel room, staring out the window at the setting sun, he realized something surprising. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his business, his wealth, or his family's expectations. He wasn't worrying about the latest tech deal or the next big project. All he could think about was Olivia, her smile, her laughter, the way she looked at him with those wide, innocent eyes. He hadn't felt this way in a long time, and it made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had found something real here in this quiet, little village. He had no idea how things would play out. Eventually, Olivia would learn the truth about who he really was, but for now, he was content to let things unfold naturally. He wasn't in a hurry, and he didn't want to ruin the connection they had built by revealing too much too soon. As the last light of the day faded from the sky, David smiled to himself. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he was excited to find out. The days in the village seemed to grow warmer and more peaceful for Olivia as her bond with Adam deepened. They spent more and more time together, sharing long walks by the river, quiet conversations under the shade of trees, and laughter over simple meals. Olivia found herself looking forward to every moment they spent together. Adam was unlike anyone she had ever known, gentle, humble, and sincere. His presence in her life had brought a sense of joy she hadn't felt in a long time. With Adam, she felt safe, as though the pain of her past had finally started to heal. Ethan's betrayal and the complexities of her old life seemed like distant memories. Every day she spent with Adam reminded her that love didn't have to be complicated by wealth, status, or power. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt free. As for Adam, in truth, he had never expected to feel this way about someone so soon after arriving in the village. He had come here to escape the pressures of his family and the constant talk of arranged marriages, but Olivia had taken him by surprise. Her warmth and innocence had captivated him from the moment they met, and as their relationship blossomed, he found himself falling for her more each day. One evening, after a quiet dinner by the river, Adam and Olivia sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air was cool, and the village was beginning to settle down for the night. Olivia looked over at Adam and smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. "I'm really glad we met," she said softly. Adam turned to her, his eyes warm with affection. "So am I." There was a brief silence between them, the kind of comfortable quiet that only comes when two people truly enjoy each other's presence. Olivia glanced up at Adam, her heart fluttering as she caught the way he was looking at her. It was a look she had never seen before, a mixture of admiration, care, and something deeper. Without thinking, Olivia leaned in just slightly, and Adam, feeling the same pull, closed the small distance between them. Their lips met in a soft, gentle kiss, the world around them fading away for a moment. It was just the two of them, lost in the warmth of that kiss, both feeling the connection between them deepen in a way that words couldn't express. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia blushed, her heart racing. Adam smiled at her, his hand brushing a strand of hair away from her face. Neither of them said a word, but the kiss had said everything. They were no longer just two friends spending time together. There was something much stronger, much deeper growing between them as their relationship blossomed. Olivia found herself happier than she had ever been. She had come to the village to escape the complications of her old life, and in Adam, she had found not only love but also a sense of belonging. But while Olivia's heart was full of joy, there was another person whose feelings had turned bitter and angry, Mia. Mia had watched from the sidelines as Olivia and Adam grew closer and couldn't hide her jealousy any longer. She had once dreamed that Marcus would choose her, and when he began showing interest in Olivia, Mia felt betrayed. Her anger had reached its boiling point. One afternoon, as Marcus was walking through the village, Mia stopped him. "Marcus, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. Marcus, distracted by thoughts of Olivia, looked at her with a puzzled expression. "What is it, Mia?" Mia took a deep breath, her anger barely contained. "Forget about Olivia. She's not interested in you. She's never going to be. You've been wasting your time chasing after her," Mia continued. Marcus frowned, his pride wounded. "What are you talking about? She just needs more time." Mia interrupted, shaking her head. "She's in love with Adam. Haven't you seen the way they've been together? She's not going to choose you. Marcus, you need to stop chasing her and look at what's right in front of you," Mia said, her voice tinged with desperation. Marcus's face darkened with realization. He had noticed how close Olivia and Adam had become, but he hadn't wanted to believe it. Now, hearing it from Mia, the truth stung even more. Mia stepped closer, her voice softening. "Why are you wasting your time on someone who doesn't want you, when I'm right here? I've always been here for you." "I don't know, Mia," Marcus muttered, still processing everything. "I just thought." "Forget about her," Mia said, her voice filled with determination. "You deserve someone who appreciates you, someone like me." Meanwhile, as Mia dealt with her heartbreak, Olivia had finally made a decision. She had spent days thinking about Adam's offer to move to the city with him. It was a big step, and she knew that returning to the city meant facing everything she had run away from. But she couldn't deny how much she loved Adam, and the thought of starting a new life with him excited her. She was ready. But just as she had made up her mind to follow him, everything changed. One afternoon, when Olivia had gone to meet Adam for a walk, they had planned to spend the day together enjoying the simple pleasures of the village. But when she arrived at their usual meeting spot, she found a group of men standing around a large truck loading equipment. "What's going on?" Olivia approached one of the workers, confused. The man looked at her and nodded toward Adam, who was standing nearby overseeing the work. "We're packing up the equipment. The project is almost done here." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, packing up?" Before the man could answer, another worker nearby spoke up, glancing at her curiously. "You didn't know? Mr. Martinez is the one running the whole operation. He's the owner of the company." Olivia felt her world tilt. "Mr. Martinez," she whispered, barely able to form the words. The worker nodded. "Yeah, David Martinez. He's the boss. He's been overseeing the installation here for weeks." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process what she had just heard. David Martinez, the name sounded familiar, almost too familiar. Slowly, the pieces started falling into place. The real reason Adam had come to the village, the workers who followed his every instruction, the way he had always seemed so comfortable around the construction crew, it all clicked. Adam wasn't just a construction worker, he was David Martinez, the self-made tech billionaire. He had been hiding his identity from her all along. Olivia stood frozen, her thoughts racing as Adam, or rather, David, walked over to her. He could see the confusion and hurt in her eyes and knew that his secret was out. "Olivia, let me explain," he said softly, reaching out for her hand. Olivia took a step back, her mind spinning. "You're David Martinez. A tech billionaire?" David nodded, his face filled with regret. "Yes. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to treat me any differently. I didn't want you to see me for my money or my status. I wanted you to see me for who I really am, just Adam." Olivia's heart ached with the realization that the man she had fallen in love with had been lying to her. But at the same time, she understood his reasons. After all, hadn't she been hiding her own secret as well? Tears filled her eyes, but she forced herself to speak. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" David stepped closer, his voice sincere. "Because I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want you to see me as some rich guy who's used to getting what he wants. I wanted you to see me just as me." Olivia looked into his eyes and saw the honesty there. He wasn't like Ethan, he wasn't trying to manipulate her or use her. He had kept his secret because he wanted something real, just like she had. After a long pause, Olivia nodded. "I forgive you," she whispered, her heart softening. "I understand why you did it." David let out a breath of relief, pulling her into his arms. "Thank you, Olivia. I don't want to lose you." Olivia held him close, feeling the weight of her own secret pressing down on her. She had been so focused on his deception that she had forgotten about her own. She knew that soon, she would have to tell him the truth about who she really was. But for now, she decided to wait. "We'll talk about everything when we get to the city," Olivia said softly, her mind made up. They would face the truth together, one step at a time. The news of David's true identity spread through the village like wildfire. It wasn't long before everyone knew that the simple, hard-working construction worker was actually David Martinez, the self-made tech billionaire. The quiet man who had helped install telecommunications devices in the village wasn't just any man, he was one of the wealthiest and most successful people in the country. Mia was stunned when she heard the news. She had always viewed David as just another ordinary villager, someone without much to offer, certainly not someone to be admired. In her mind, he had been beneath Marcus, the wealthiest man in the village. She had mocked Olivia for choosing him, thinking that Marcus, with his large house and status, was the better catch. But now, as she learned the truth, regret washed over her. She sat in her small room, her mind replaying all the times she had looked down on David. She had ignored him, treated him as though he wasn't worth her time, and now the man she had dismissed as poor and insignificant was the billionaire everyone else dreamed of. Mia's jealousy and frustration boiled over, but more than that, she felt a deep sense of regret. It wasn't just about the money, Mia realized that her obsession with wealth and status had blinded her to what truly mattered. She had been chasing after Marcus, thinking that his wealth would bring her happiness, but now she could see that Marcus's wealth was nothing compared to the quiet dignity and genuine kindness David had shown. As Mia sat in her room reflecting on the events that had unfolded, she realized something important: people were often more than they appeared. The world wasn't just about chasing gold and wealth, it was about finding value in people's hearts, something she had overlooked. Marcus, on the other hand, was consumed with jealousy and bitterness. He couldn't believe that David, the man he had viewed as beneath him, had turned out to be a billionaire. It stung his pride, knowing that Olivia had chosen David over him, especially now that he knew who David really was. Marcus had spent so much time trying to win Olivia's affection with his money and status, but in the end, it hadn't mattered. As Marcus paced around his house, his mind whirling with anger and frustration, he realized that his life, despite his wealth, felt empty. He had been chasing after Olivia, thinking that his money and influence would eventually win her over, but now he was left with nothing but bitterness. As he watched David and Olivia leave the village together, he felt a profound sense of loss and emptiness. Meanwhile, Olivia and David Martinez returned to the city. Their time in the village had brought them closer together, and Olivia felt more certain than ever that she had found someone she could truly love. Despite the whirlwind of emotions that came with discovering David's true identity, she had come to understand that his deception wasn't meant to hurt her. In fact, it had only made her love him more. David had wanted to be loved for who he truly was, not for his money or status. But the city brought with it a new set of challenges. As they entered the sprawling urban landscape, David's demeanor changed slightly. He was more serious, more thoughtful, and Olivia could tell he was worried about something. She tried not to let it bother her too much, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them, something she wasn't prepared for. It wasn't long before her fears were confirmed. David told Olivia that he wanted her to meet his family. He was serious about their relationship and wanted her to be a part of his life. Olivia, although nervous, was excited about the idea. She had never been formally introduced to anyone's family in this way before, and it made her feel hopeful about their future together. But when they arrived at David's family home, things quickly took a turn for the worse. David's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, were not what Olivia had expected. They were wealthy, well-dressed, and had an air of sophistication that immediately put Olivia on edge. Mrs. Martinez, in particular, seemed to eye Olivia with suspicion from the moment she walked through the door. "Mom, Dad, this is Olivia," David said, his voice filled with pride and affection as he introduced her. Olivia smiled warmly, but her heart sank as she noticed the coldness in their expressions. Mr. Martinez didn't even try to hide his disapproval. His lips pressed into a thin line as he looked her up and down. "And where exactly are you from?" Mrs. Martinez asked, her tone sharp and dismissive. David took a deep breath, ready to defend Olivia, but before he could speak, Mr. Martinez cut in. "She's from some village," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "A poor orphan, from what I hear." "Come on, Dad, I can't believe you have been keeping tabs on me." "You seem to know everything happening in my life," David replied, incredulous. "Olivia is trying to live a quiet life or something, but I can't believe she's the heiress to the Martinez empire." Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes as she felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. She fought to keep her composure. "How could you look at me like that, as though I were nothing?" Mr. Martinez continued, his voice growing colder with each word. "David, we've talked about this. You need to marry someone suitable, someone who comes from a family like ours. We've already told you that the daughter of Mr. Thompson is the perfect match, not this." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "They mean me." David stepped forward, his voice firm. "I don't care about Mr. Thompson's daughter, and I don't care about family connections. I love Olivia, and that's all that matters." Mrs. Martinez shook her head, clearly displeased. "David, you can't be serious. She's not one of us. You have responsibilities and expectations. Marrying her would be a mistake." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had hoped that coming back to the city with David would mean a fresh start, but instead, it felt like she was back in the world she had run from, where money and status meant everything. "I won't marry anyone but Olivia," David said, his voice unshakable. "I've made my choice." Olivia looked at David, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. He was standing by her, even in the face of his family's disapproval. Despite his loyalty, the judgment from his parents cut deep. David turned to Olivia, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Olivia forced a smile, trying to be strong. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her heart ached. She wanted to tell him the truth, that she wasn't just some poor orphan from a village, but she was Olivia Martinez, the daughter of the man his parents wanted him to marry. But now wasn't the time. The shock of it all was too much. Olivia sat quietly in her friend Emma's apartment, staring out of the window at the busy city below. It had only been a few days since she had returned from the village with David, and already her life felt like it had been turned upside down. The weight of everything that had happened in the last few days hung heavily on her heart. Her relationship with David had been unexpected, something she had never planned or even imagined. They had met in the most unassuming way, in a quiet village far from the world of wealth and status. But now, the truth was coming to light, and it was more complicated than she could have ever anticipated. David was actually David Martinez, the very man her parents had wanted her to marry, and she was Olivia Martinez, the daughter of the richest man in the city, the very person his parents wanted him to marry. Though they had no idea yet, it was almost too much to process. For years, Olivia had done everything she could to keep her identity private. She had always been uncomfortable with the spotlight that came with her family's wealth and had gone out of her way to live a life away from the expectations of the elite. Unlike many other wealthy heirs and heiresses, Olivia had never been interested in attending social events or forming connections with other elite families. She had always tried to keep a low profile, even declining interviews or public appearances that could have made her more recognizable. She had built a life of anonymity, one where people didn't associate her name with her father's fortune. But now, her carefully guarded secret was on the brink of being exposed. Sighing deeply, Olivia leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. How had things gotten so complicated, she thought. Her relationship with David was real, and her feelings for him were deeper than anything she had ever felt before. Just as Olivia was lost in thought, her phone buzzed on the table beside her. She glanced at it, expecting a message from Emma, but her heart skipped a beat when she saw the caller ID, Mrs. Martinez. Olivia stared at the phone for a moment, unsure of what to do. She hadn't expected to hear from David's mother. Taking a deep breath, she answered the call. "Hello," she said cautiously. Mrs. Martinez's voice was cold but controlled. "Olivia, I think we need to have a talk. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at the Lux Cafe on 5th Avenue? I'll see you there at 10 a.m. Olivia's stomach twisted with anxiety. She hadn't expected Mrs. Martinez to reach out to her, and judging by the tone of her voice, this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. But Olivia knew she had no choice, she had to face this head-on. "I'll be there," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The next morning, Olivia arrived at Lux Cafe, a high-end spot known for its elegant decor and expensive clientele. As she stepped inside, she felt a familiar sense of discomfort. This was the world she had been born into but had always felt out of place in, a world of luxury and exclusivity that seemed more focused on appearances than anything real. Mrs. Martinez was already seated at a corner table, her posture perfect and her expression unreadable. Olivia took a deep breath and walked over, her heart pounding as she approached. "Thank you for coming," Mrs. Martinez said coolly, gesturing for Olivia to sit down. Olivia sat, her nerves on edge. She could feel the weight of Mrs. Martinez's gaze on her, measuring, judging her. "I'll get straight to the point," Mrs. Martinez began, her voice sharp. "You seem like a nice enough girl, but my son has no business being with someone like you. David has responsibilities and expectations. He comes from a family with a certain level of influence, and he needs to marry someone who can match that." Olivia's chest tightened, but she remained silent, listening as Mrs. Martinez continued. "I know you come from a small village," Mrs. Martinez said dismissively, "and I'm sure you think you love him, but you're not right for him. You can't give him the kind of life he needs, the kind of future he deserves. So I'm asking you, I'm telling you, to walk away. Leave my son's circle." Olivia felt a wave of anger and hurt rise within her, but she kept her voice calm. "I love him," she said quietly. "And he loves me." Mrs. Martinez's eyes narrowed. "Love is not enough, my dear, not in our world. David needs someone who can support him, who can match his status. You'll only hold him back." Olivia clenched her fists under the table, fighting to keep her emotions in check. She had expected something like this, but hearing it from Mrs. Martinez's mouth still stung deeply. "And if love isn't enough?" Mrs. Martinez added, her voice dripping with disdain, perhaps this will help. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Olivia stared at the envelope, realizing what was inside: money. I'm offering you this to go away, Mrs. Martinez said coldly. Take it, disappear, and find someone else. You don't belong in my son's circle. Olivia's eyes remained fixed on the envelope. Mrs. Martinez had expected disapproval, but this being offered money to disappear from David's life was beyond anything she could have imagined. For a moment, the room around her seemed to blur, and all she could feel was the weight of the insult, the sharp sting of Mrs. Martinez's words cutting into her slowly. Olivia lifted her gaze to meet Mrs. Martinez's cold, expectant eyes. I don't want your money, Olivia said firmly, pushing the envelope back across the table. You can't buy me off. Mrs. Martinez's expression hardened, and her lips thinned with frustration. Do you honestly think you can give him what he needs? David has a future ahead of him, one that involves a woman of substance and class. You're nothing but a poor orphan from a village. You have nothing to offer him. Olivia's heart raced, but she refused to let her emotions get the best of her. She had come too far and endured too much to be broken by someone who knew nothing about her true identity. She remained silent, her hands clenched in her lap. She had never wanted to reveal her identity, never wanted to use her name or her wealth to prove herself. But now, sitting across from Mrs. Martinez, she realized that things had gone too far. She couldn't keep hiding who she was. Not if she wanted a future with David. Mrs. Martinez stood up, her patience clearly wearing thin. This is your last chance, she said sharply. Take the money and leave, or you'll regret it. Olivia stood up as well, her heart pounding but her mind made up. I love David, and I'm not going anywhere. He chose me because of who I am, not because of my status or my background. Mrs. Martinez's face twisted in anger. You'll regret this, girl, she spat before turning and walking away, leaving Olivia standing alone at the table as the door of the cafe closed behind her. Olivia felt the weight of the conversation settle heavily on her shoulders. She stood there for a moment longer, gathering her thoughts. Mrs. Martinez's words echoed in her mind, but something else began to rise within her, a sense of resolve. It was time to reveal the truth. She had hidden who she was for so long, but this was no longer just about protecting her anonymity. This was about fighting for the man she loved and for the future they both deserved. With a deep breath, Olivia pulled out her phone and dialed her parents' number. The phone rang twice before her mother's warm and familiar voice came through. Olivia, darling, is everything okay? Mom, Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly but filled with determination. I need to talk to you. Her mother responded with concern. What is it, darling? Olivia confessed, her heart pounding as the words spilled out. I've fallen in love, Mom. The man I've fallen in love with is David Martinez, the same David you and Dad wanted me to marry. But he doesn't know I'm Olivia Martinez. He thinks I'm just a girl from a village, an orphan. His parents. Her voice caught in her throat. They don't want him to be with me. They think I'm not good enough for him. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then her mother spoke softly. Olivia, you've always done things your way, and we've always respected that. But if you love this man, if you truly want a life with him, then you need to tell him the truth. He deserves to know who you are, and you deserve to be loved for all of who you are, not just part of it. Olivia's eyes welled with tears, but she smiled softly. Her mother's words offered the reassurance she needed. You're right, Mom. It's time. Her mother added gently, we'll support you. Olivia nodded, even though her mother couldn't see her. Thank you, Mom. I'm going to tell him everything. I just hope it's not too late. After ending the call, Olivia felt a sense of clarity wash over her. The truth she had hidden would soon come to light, and though the thought of revealing her identity to David terrified her, she knew it was the right thing to do. Olivia sat quietly in the back of the sleek black car as it navigated the busy city streets, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. The glittering lights of the city reflected off the windows, casting a soft glow inside the car, but all she could think about was what lay ahead. Tonight was the night she would finally reveal everything, not just to David but to the world. David had invited her to the charity auction, a high society event that was one of the biggest nights of the year for the city's elite. When he asked her to come, Olivia had felt a rush of both excitement and dread. She loved David deeply, but she had been hiding a part of herself for so long that the weight of her secret had become unbearable. She couldn't keep pretending anymore. For weeks, she had struggled with how to tell him the truth, that she wasn't just some girl from a village, but Olivia Martinez, the daughter of the richest man in the city, the woman his parents had been pushing him to marry. Though neither of them had known it at the time, when David had first invited her to the auction, Olivia had been hesitant. She wasn't one for grand events or mingling with the wealthy elite, but as the days passed and she considered how much longer she could keep hiding the truth, she realized that this event might be the perfect opportunity. Maybe revealing her identity at such a public event would make things easier, less personal. After all, she hadn't been able to find the right words to confess to David, and this way, she wouldn't have to hide any longer. So, she called her parents and filled them in. She would use this night, the auction, to reveal who she truly was, not just to David but to everyone. It was time for the charade to end. As the car pulled up to the grand venue, Olivia took a deep breath and smoothed down the elegant dress she was wearing. It was a beautiful gown, simple yet classy, chosen by her mother for the occasion. When she had told her parents that she would be revealing her identity tonight, they had been fully supportive. They understood the importance of the moment and had assured her that they would stand by her side when the time came. The driver opened the door, and Olivia stepped out onto the red carpet leading into the ballroom. Her heart raced as she took in the grand scene before her. The venue was breathtaking, with chandeliers glittering in the night sky and a red carpet lined with photographers and reporters. Elite guests arrived in glamorous gowns and tailored suits, flashing smiles for the cameras as they entered the event. Olivia took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this, but tonight, she would have no choice. Tonight, everyone would know who she was, and there would be no turning back. As she made her way into the ballroom, the sight of David waiting for her by the entrance made her heart skip a beat. He looked as handsome as ever in his tailored black tuxedo, his smile lighting up his face. When he saw her, Olivia felt a momentary pang of guilt, knowing that he still didn't know the full truth about her. But soon, that would all change. David approached her, his eyes filled with affection. "You look stunning," he said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. Olivia smiled, though her nerves remained just beneath the surface. "Thank you," she whispered. "You look amazing too." Together, they made their way through the grand hall, where the city's wealthiest families mingled over champagne and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. The evening was filled with excitement, and the grand auction was set to begin shortly. But all Olivia could think about was the moment that was fast approaching, the moment when she would step into the light and reveal her true identity. The auction began with a flurry of activity. Rare items were brought to the stage, with elite guests bidding astronomical sums for paintings, jewelry, and luxury experiences. The room buzzed with energy, but Olivia's mind was elsewhere. She felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her, and she knew the time was coming. As the auctioneer called for a brief intermission, the host of the event, a famous socialite, stepped forward with a bright smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice ringing through the hall, "we are honored to have some very special guests with us tonight. Please welcome Olivia Martinez, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, who have been key supporters of tonight's event." The applause was polite at first, but as Olivia stood and made her way toward the stage, a ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. Many of the guests had never seen Olivia before. She had always kept a low profile and avoided public appearances, but tonight, she was stepping out of the shadows. As she took her place beside her parents, the shock on David's parents' faces was very obvious. Mrs. Martinez's eyes widened in disbelief, and Mr. Martinez looked utterly stunned. They had spent weeks dismissing Olivia as a poor orphan, someone unworthy of their son, but now seeing her standing beside the wealthiest family in the room, they realized the truth. Olivia Martinez wasn't just some girl from a village, she was the daughter of the richest man in the city, the very woman they had wanted David to marry all along. Mrs. Martinez's hand flew to her mouth, and Mr. Martinez exchanged a look of shock with his wife. David, meanwhile, stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief as he watched the scene unfold before him. After the applause died down, Olivia wasted no time. She quickly made her way toward David, her heart racing as she approached him. "David," she said softly, reaching for his hand. "I need to explain." Without a word, David led her outside, away from the prying eyes of the guests. They stepped onto a quiet terrace where the cool night air hit them both, and Olivia felt the weight of the moment settle over her. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Olivia began, her voice trembling slightly. "I never meant to deceive you. I just didn't know how to tell you the truth. When we met in the village, I was trying to live a simple life. I didn't want anyone to know who I really was, especially not you. I wanted to find real love, not based on wealth or status." David stared at her, still processing the truth. "So you're Olivia Martinez, the one my parents have been talking about?" Olivia nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. "Yes. I didn't know who you really were either, not at first. But once I found out, I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd think I was hiding it on purpose." David let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "This is a lot to take in, but I get it. I really do." Olivia blinked in surprise. "You're not upset?" David smiled, reaching for her hand. "I wasn't telling you who I really was because I wanted to live a simpler life for a while. I didn't want people to see me as the billionaire tech guy. Just like you didn't want to be seen as the heiress." Olivia's heart swelled with relief and love as David pulled her into his arms. "So, we're both guilty," she said softly, resting her head against his chest. David chuckled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I guess so." They stood there for a moment, wrapped in each other's arms. The weight of their secrets was finally lifted. They had both hidden parts of themselves out of fear, but now there were no more secrets between them. They were just Olivia and David, two people who had found love in the most unexpected way. "I love you," Olivia whispered, looking up into his eyes. "I love you too," David replied, leaning down to capture her lips in a soft, tender kiss. Inside the ballroom, the mood had shifted. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, who had been so adamant about keeping Olivia away from their son, now approached her parents with sheepish smiles. "We had no idea," Mrs. Martinez said, her voice filled with regret. "We're so sorry for the way we treated your daughter. We misjudged her completely." Mr. Martinez smiled warmly. "No harm done. What matters now is that they found each other, and that is what we intended all along." As the families reconciled, the news of Olivia and David's engagement spread through the room, filling the air with excitement and joy. The elite guests who had once gossiped about Olivia's humble background now whispered in awe about the union of two of the city's most powerful families. A few months later, Olivia and David stood hand in hand at their wedding, surrounded by their loved ones. Their journey had been filled with secrets, misunderstandings, and challenges, but through it all, they had found something more valuable than wealth or status. They had found love. The kind of love that saw beyond appearances and into the heart. As they exchanged vows and kissed under the bright sky, they knew they had learned a lesson that would stay with them for the rest of their lives: never judge someone based on appearances, because sometimes the most precious treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places. And so, they began their new life together, united by love, trust, and the knowledge that they had found something real.